Hello, Promotional Products Association International is pleased to present the educational program Character Branding Series 3 of 4, Incorporate the Power of Story for Sales Success. My name is William and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Please note that today's program is being recorded and all participant phone lines will be muted during this broadcast. Today's presentation will last approximately 60 minutes. You may submit a question or comment at any time during today's presentation using the Q&A window on the lower right-hand panel of your screen. Immediately following today's webinar, your screen will be directed to an online survey. Completing this short survey will allow PPAI to continuously improve our webinars and to better meet your needs. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Gary Kaskowitz, MBA, PhD, is an Associate Professor of Management at Moravian College in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. He's the author of Branded Like Barack, How Barack Obama Sold Himself to America and What We Can Learn from This. Gary's research and teaching focus on marketing principles, both classic and modern. Gary has developed and taught college courses on marketing management, strategic marketing, consumer behavior, market research, personal sales, storytelling and branding, and the morality of marketing. Jim Sochi, CAS, the president of Artistic Toy, a promotional products industry supplier of stuffed plush toys. Jim joined the field of marketing after a career in finance and accounting. Jim and his team at Artistic Toy are on a mission to inspire the use of plush toys in advertising. They believe in every organization can tell a better brand story through their character. And without further ado, I give you Jim Sochi and Gary Kaskowitz.
Thank you, William. Well, welcome to our third in our series of 4 webinars on branding with character. Before we jump into the power of story for sales success, I'd like to thank those of you that are returning attendees. William indicated we had over 140 people that signed up. We really appreciate that. We really also appreciate the comments and the ratings that we've received. Very good. So thank you again for all those return attendees. For the new attendees, I want to thank you for joining us as well. I encourage you to go back and check out the playbacks of the other 2 character branding webinars. And just in case you don't get to chance to go back, I do want to give you a 2-minute recap of what we talked about in our first and our second webinars. In our first webinar, we revealed the 6 cornerstones of successful brands, debunked some myths that many marketing professionals have about branding, gave several case study examples of how successful brands use character to brand. The notion about stamping a logo on a product and calling it branding is a discredit to our profession. Branding and using imprinted product is about using the product to assist in retelling the brand story and anchor that message with the customer. So that's what we covered in our first webinar. In our second webinar, we discussed speaking a new language with your clients. We need to engage our clients at a deep enough level that they will share what really drives them to make decisions. We uncovered 4 primary yearnings of all people and recognize that if we understand our customers psychologically first, we can ask better questions. That will get us the real challenge that they're having, and from there, we can develop solutions. I think most of us would agree that marketers, like good leaders, have something in common. They ask, number 1, great questions, and they know how to listen very carefully. So now that we've brought you up to speed with our webinars, we're going to tell you a little bit more about what you're going to learn, what branding is really about, storytelling and finding real problems. Now that we know that, we can continue our journey into character branding to see how and why stories are so important to brands. Gary is going to take the reins here in a moment and take us to his classroom, let's say at Moravian College, and give us, let's say, about a 20-minute overview of a 16-week course he does on storytelling. He's going to share with us why story is important to branding, what does proper story structure look like, explain the most successful of all story types, which is known as the hero's journey. And we like to keep these webinars, sessions interactive, fast-paced. So if Gary mentions something that I like to say provocative, I will stop him and ask some more questions for clarification. Gary's got he's a master at branding. He's got a lot of material to cover, a lot of ground to cover here for us. So without any further ado, in this short period of time, I would like to turn this presentation over to Gary. Gary, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, Gary, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I was saying thank you again. That's a wonderful build-up, and you are right. There are so much to do with branding and story, and today I'm just so excited that we can share some of the scratch the surface, if you will, but give you a really deep understanding as well in one aspect, because we can learn something that a lot of marketers and a lot of people in sales just never really quite understand, and that is the power of story, which is always kind of interesting to me because I think intuitively everybody does understand the power of story, but when it comes to actually using this power in our lives, we don't really quite understand and get how to do that. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity for us to share these thoughts and ideas with the audience today so that we can really kind of get this notion out there. And as you were saying, the reason I like the notion of storytelling when it comes to a brand, as we've discussed in previous webinars, the brand basically is what promises your value to your customer, to your audience. And so when you're selling a promotional product to a company, their brand in turn sells their value to their audience. So what you're doing basically is you're facilitating this whole wonderful business transaction of people getting their stories out there. And when properly applied, the promotional products industry can really support the conveyance of your customers, your clients, your audience, their brand to their customers. And by the use of story, it allows you not only to sell to your clients more, but in turn, your clients can sell to their customers more so that it becomes a win-win-win, as I like to say with everybody I talk to, is that's always the best way to do things. So with that being the case, as Jim, as you're saying, storytelling, that is something which is really useful to us to understand in that we're hardwired for it, is the bottom line. People, we're all aware that the society, culture we exist in has not always been what we call a literate society. We have back to the pre-literate days where people conveyed messages about their context, about their culture to each other. This is before people could read and write, basically. And how did they convey what they wanted to impart to their client, to their culture, I should say, before you could read and write? Well, you did it through a story. And so stories have evolved over thousands and thousands and thousands of years because what they are is they're a way for the human mind to really grasp what it is we're talking about. So if I just tell you a bunch of facts and figures and start drawing on and on about product specs, things like that, real soon your eyes will start glazing over. If instead I can make it a story where I have that whole story structure that we're going to talk about in part of it, then you're going to get in step with me because, again, we're predisposed to listen to stories. It helps us take down our barriers. It helps us be willing to listen to what the message is. It really helps us get an understanding much more deeply than just a bunch of facts, figures, and recitation of things. And I think you'll find this with most of our lives. When you tell stories and use stories, they are wonderful tools to communicate information. And the reason I say this is really very useful, if you think back to the original purpose of story and why storytelling existed throughout millennia, it has to do with what we call the idea of conveying basic truths about ourselves to the people that we talk to. And so, in fact, this is kind of funny. Just the other day in class, I was talking with a bunch of students, and we were going over the fairy tale, The Three Little Pigs. I'm sure you're familiar with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the Three Little Pigs, everyone knows the story of the Three Little Pigs, I think. But we were talking about why was this story originated? What was the purpose to it? And we went to the original version of it. And the whole point of the Three Little Pigs is to convey a basic truth about the culture. When you're teaching your kids who can't necessarily read or write, here's a story to remember about, And most people actually get that one wrong. They think that the real point to the Three Little Pigs is all about, beware the wolf, which is actually more a subplot than anything in that story. The real point to the Three Little Pigs, if you read the original one and listen to it, is the whole idea of if you're industrious, if you're a hard worker, and if you do what's required of you, then you will succeed, and you'll beat out those who are lazier or trying to take things from you. And that kind of is what the culture at the time dictated as a basic truth for themselves. And so the reason we like storytelling is that it allows us to identify what are those things that we absolutely believe in, what are those things that we strongly desire, and how can we therefore convey and obtain that through the story process. And that, again, for everybody listening, that is probably the most important takeaway with this notion of using story when you sell. Stories allow us to convey the realities that we desire. And if you understand that basic point, then the rest of this is actually, even though we only have 20 minutes, like Jim says, for a 16-week course, basically, it's okay, because that's the real premise of the entire process. A story conveys a reality that we'd like to have. And if we can get that conveyed to our audience, to our customers, to our clients, then we have a lot of marketing and branding gold at our disposal.
Yeah, Gary, as you talk about that, what I find most interesting is the whole structure, everything you're gonna talk about and teach us is important, but it's the fact that we just frame it up in our mind as this story, and it is easy, and it's something that we all can use. And your customers, it's like you said, we're hardwired for it, and it allows us to interpret it for ourselves. You know, versus us just coming in and saying, "Oh, this is what everything means," and now you have to, you know, remember it and apply it. Whereas the story can help us do that. That's why I get very excited about you know, storytelling and thinking, "Oh, how in my business, how can I help, you know, my customers search out that story a little bit better, or tell their story even better?"
You're exactly right, Jim, because good story, and for everybody listening, this is the important point with this, is it allows you to get in step with your customers. It allows you to get in step with the people you're talking to. Everyone is predisposed to listen to stories when it comes down to it, because that's what we're been, you know, we're just basically, it's part of our genetic DNA at this point when it comes down to it. And because of that, we can therefore understand what is it that motivates the people we want to deal with. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. But what motivates them, and therefore, how can I help you live out your own story? And that's the key here. What we're going to talk about is how I can help you fulfill and live your personal story, your personal journey, what's most important to you. And that's what a good salesperson does.
I like that. Live out your own story. So that's a short story, folks. Live out your own story.
Absolutely right. Thank you. Yeah, live out your story. And that is the purpose to this, because what we want to do when we tell our stories, and this is, we'll play it two different ways. The first way, and the more common expected way, is let's say you're a promotional products consultant selling your services to a client. Okay, that's option one. Option two is the extension of that, your client selling his or her story to their customer. But let's focus on you selling to your client first. Fair enough?
Yep, let's do that.
Okay, great. When you use proper story structure, what you want to do is realize basic story. And some of this, again, it should be intuitive. You should say, "Oh, I know that," because frankly, you should know story. All stories, as we know, have a good beginning, a good middle, and a good end. And that's all well and good, but what that basically means is that a good story has a good structure. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, there are a few common structures that we all use in storytelling. And if you think about this, and this is why I like to talk with anybody who takes this type of class or works with me on story and branding, basically I challenge anybody to think of a very popular book or movie or something that you're very familiar with and not be able to find a predecessor to it, something which it was done before, but all they've done is change the surroundings. So the example I like to give is think of your favorite romantic comedy. Okay? If you think of your favorite romantic comedy, how many of those have been around in the last 15, 20 years that you've seen in movies or books?
I would say probably quite a few.
Yeah, quite a few. Because the basic premise is rom-coms, romantic comedies, follow a very basic structure. And if you think to any romantic comedy, they all follow the same structure. The classic boy meet girl, boy and girl, fight, boy and girl fall in love, boy and girl have conflict, boy loses girl, and boy gets girl back. And that's kind of the philosophy here, but it doesn't only have to be boys and girls. It can be, different variations of that theme. I've seen it played out with dogs in movies. People just find that basic structure. But nonetheless, by getting in step with the structure that we're used to, that here's my beginning, here's my opening, here's my grabber, here's my middle, here's the basic thrust of the story, the conflict we'll talk about in a little bit, and here's how I bring it all together for you. Here's how I show you how you're part of the story as well. By doing that, That is the classic structure. And the good news for us, Jim, there's only about 7 to 12, depending who you listen to, but there's only about 7 to 12 classic structures that you can use in terms of your plots and your genres and your physical structure. So if you want to just learn those basic ones, you're home free because you just model one of them. And that's the beauty of using the structure.
Got it. So
yeah.
So I guess my first question is what, do you have any tips for us in terms of what makes a good beginning, middle, or end of a story?
Absolutely. Some really good tips that you need to be aware of. First of all, two of the most important pieces to this is the notion of creating the proper character and understanding what the role of the stories are. That's number one. And then the second, the biggest tip is conflict. Conflict is crucial to all good story. Because what happens with good stories is that people like to have a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of friction. What's good next? What's next? What's next? If I don't have that sense of, anticipation, you're going to tune me out. So the stronger I can make the anticipation, then the better the story is going to be. Now, in terms of how to start a good story, what I always tell people is you start at your lowest point. And this is a sales technique that we're going to talk about, that Jim and I have discussed. We'll talk about later, the feel, felt, found technique. But basically what that means, think to your lives when you're selling to your clients. Think to your business, think to your industry. Think to why you are successful today, all right? And so at some point, all of us, we've had heartache, we've had trouble, we've had struggle. This is the human connective tissue. This is what ties us together, is that notion of struggle that we all face. And if I understand and start with, here's the struggle, then I can really tie you in much more easily. So if you have that idea, that struggle is the conflict. Now, to top that off, what you want to do, Jim, is when you are telling your story or using story structure to sell, you have to identify what are the various characters and roles that exist throughout all common story. Now, we're going to touch upon that today, but for those of you who really want to know this in depth, tune in for Webinar 4, where we go into this in much more detail. But I'll give you kind of a preview, if you will, a preview of coming attractions. Might as well be a good storyteller. But the preview here is, once more, there's about 10 to 12, I use 12, different main roles that we all see in our stories, that we find everywhere. And here's the beauty of these roles. The roles basically are those characterizations which we identify with. So for example, you might identify with a classic lover type role. I just talked about the rom-com. And that's a classic lover type role where somebody is looking for a deep connection to somebody else or to something else. They want something bigger beyond themselves. And so if there's a character that is that lover character, that's going to resonate with you because you're sharing that yearning, you're sharing that power of, I want deep connection. I want to connect with the people I talk to in a deep, personal way. That's one aspect. You might relate to the role of somebody who is a classic, what we call a caregiver, somebody who's the nurturer, who goes out there and helps others and takes them and shields them and, defends them and does all these good things because they truly care about other people. You might relate to a character role which is a bit of a joker, somebody who likes to liven things up and have a little bit of fun. And if you think back again to all of your different books that you like, movies that you've enjoyed, things like that, and think to the characters that you most strongly identify with, there's the real good chance that you in your personal life are sharing some type of yearning that character expresses. So I'm a yearning for harmony. I have a desire for knowledge. I have a desire to, take on and overcome obstacles. These are all common desires that people have, which throughout thousands and thousands of years, storytellers have basically codified into just a few common characters that we can use at our disposal to create story.
So one of the questions I had, and I think you answered it for me, was, so how do you tell this story and bring people in? And and my, what I'm hearing you say is that it's because that you have the conflict of the character and who that character is. If you're in any way like that character, if you have a similar yearning to that character, you're automatically drawn. You're automatically drawn in. You're hooked. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's one way, Jim, because that's the best thing. Like in sales, we all know that people buy from people they like. So if you can get in step with your client, and if you say, I share your frustration, I know that you started this business in order to really help those around you in your community, to really be something important, to take care of them, blah, 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 and that's why I'm here too. That's one aspect, is that you really connect with them at that deeper level, which is really important in sales, is to have that connection. I'll tell you this, a little secret, though, that a lot of people don't really realize. That's wonderful. I heartily encourage that. But even better and more powerful than that, Jim, is the notion of if you have that same yearning as a customer. I started my business to take care of others. I started my business to really help my community and to really fend for my family, because what I really want is that notion of belonging to this group, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? And I can identify that while I interview you and talk to you, that that's what you want. Then what I need to do is show how my product, whatever I'm selling, the promotional product in this case, is going to be a prop for you to live out your personal story. So it's wonderful if you and I are the same character type, which is great, but it doesn't have to be, because I can support you. I can still be a support role to you in your own character's journey in terms of how you envision your own life story. And that's the key to this. I can be in your journey with you and supporting you, just like in any number of movies or books, you have that whole idea of story, of supporting roles, things like that. That's the same idea here. Does that make sense, that whole idea?
No, absolutely. What resonates with me is how does my product help my customer live out their role or their character? And once I have identified that, I've created, even if we're not a like match, even if you're like, I'm this caregiver and they're a jokester or something,
right.
We can still work together. I can still help support them just by knowing who they are and positioning, my products, my solutions, my services in the way that's going to speak best to them.
Absolutely right. That's the key, because as we've talked about before, and I want to reiterate because I know you and I firmly believe this, and this is especially for people who might be hearing us for the first time, Jim, I think it needs to be said again. When we talk about character, when you and I talk about character, we look at character two different ways. Character in the way I'm discussing right now in terms of what is your role, how do you see yourself, what is your yearning, which is all part of the sales persona, if you will. But I think both you and I think of character in another way, which is, to me, more profound and even deeper, and that's the notion of character as integrity, character as a relationship, character as I truly care about you. And if we have that second character, the one of true integrity, the one of caring about our customers, you and I don't have to share the same big C character in terms of, we believe the world the same way, because we still want to support each other. And it might not be seeing the world the same way or have the same desires necessarily, but I want you to succeed in your desires. And that's true integrity, that's true relationship marketing, which is what you and I are both all about. And so I think it's really important that we reiterate that and have that distinction there. As long as you have character, integrity character, then your other character will be a support to the people, because that's what you'll be through integrity.
That's awesome. And as you were going through this, something jumped into my mind that I just thought, like, here we are, we're in your class, and it's like, it's almost time for some homework. I know, because to make this real, what are we going to do to really understand our yearnings? Sometimes our yearnings just don't come to the top of our head here. And as you were saying, I think it may be a good exercise for us to come, to watch maybe some of those movies that, again, like Braveheart or When Harry Met Sally, and say, what part of that movie really charged me up emotionally, and say, what's that yearning that I'm getting, so to speak, from this movie, and say, I got to do that in my life. I got to do that in my work.
Exactly. That's really good, is to get that idea there. And if you want homework, I'll give you all homework, because this is my favorite exercise. Seriously, this is my homework assignment. And go ahead and do it and email to me. I'll give you guys feedback if you want. I'll tell you exactly, hey, this is great, and keep going with it, or you might want to consider that way. So do this homework and then send it to me, and I won't give you a better grade, but I'll give you feedback.
I was going to say, we need to pay more if we want the grade.
Yeah. So I won't give you a grade, but I will give you feedback. And here's my homework assignment for you, which is a legitimate homework assignment that I encourage everybody to do in terms of this whole notion of character and yearning and the rest of it. Everyone on this call is probably familiar with what we call a vision statement. You've heard of them, right? Your mission statement, your vision statement, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. However, most people have that backwards, in my opinion, because what most people do with their mission and vision statements when they're in businesses is, okay, we aspire to be the predominant purveyor of blah, 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 blah. We're going to bring happiness and health to everyone we deal with, blah, 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 blah. And it's all about me. It's all about the organization, my vision, what I want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, isn't that what we normally see?
Absolutely.
Right? My homework assignment for you, Jim, and everybody in this call, and I will look at them. I won't give you a letter grade, but I will review them, is to write what I call my vision for you statement. Because what this will do is it shows, first of all, the character of integrity we're talking about, most importantly, but more than that, it shows you how you see your position in life. So this is easier for anyone who has children, but if not, you can still play the game. And think to this like you have a child, and that child is your world. You love this child. You want them to succeed. You want everything possible for them. And you have a vision for what that child can do for him or herself that that person cannot even see for him or herself. You see something in them. You see an opportunity for them. You see a goal for them that may not even see for themselves. And if you get that, it's my vision for you. What do I want you to have? You as my client. What do I really want you to end up with at the end of the day? And if this is what I want for you, this is my passion, I want you to have this type of success because I know how important this success will be to your life. Even though you may not see that for yourself, I want you to have it. Then you'll go through walls to give to people because you know that this is what we call the elixir. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is the answer. This is something I can really help you with. And, you know, you will, if you truly have that love for the people you talk to, your clients, and you know that this is the answer, you won't say no the first 5 times because anybody who's in sales knows that on average, how many times do you have to get past no to get to a yes in sales?
9 out of 10 times.
Yeah, well, the rule of thumb is a minimum of 7 no's to get to a yes on average. Somebody has to say no to you 7 times before they say yes to you. Okay, so those of us who give up on the first no, you're not really showing them the love of what you can do for them. Now, I'm not going to say, you know, shove it down their throats. If they're obviously disinterested or it's not a match, then you also owe it to them to back off and go to somebody else who you can actually service in a more amenable fashion. And in fact, in relationship marketing, as you know and talk about, Jim, there's a saying we call fire some customers, and not everybody is necessarily a good fit for you. And if they're not a good fit, you're not doing them or yourself a service to sell to them because is it to make all of you unhappy? Why make everybody unhappy? Give them to somebody who can actually be more in lockstep with them, who has that character identification that is a better resonance with them. So that's kind of, you know, something that you can do as an action step right now. What is it? Why are you in business? What do you see for your clients that they may not even see for themselves? Where's that passion at? And from that, we can start deriving character and everything else.
Absolutely. Fantastic. That's a great homework assignment. I'm looking forward to doing that, Gary, and I hope your email box fills up. So why don't we just cross over to the hero's journey?
Certainly, thank you. Yeah, the hero's journey, as I was saying before, Jim, is a classic story structure. There's again about 7 to 12 of these kind of genre sort of thing, but the hero's journey is a classic structure which is seen in probably about 70% of everything you're familiar with in terms of books and movies and things like that. Now, it's a classic, what we call mythic structure. When we think of mythic structure, it's the going back and referring to like the original Greek and Roman myths. And if you think back to why the Greek and Roman myths evolved, basically, as I said, they were there to convey what society deemed as important truths for themselves. And here's what I want you to know as a member of my culture. And you can't read or write, so I'm going to tell you a story with this structure to keep your interest and to have you remember it. And so that's the classic structure. Well, what Hero's Journey says is, hey, if we see this basic structure and we can model it, we can use this in our lives, and in fact, most of us see it in our lives every day, and we can use it when we sell. And what the Hero's Journey structure basically says is, okay, it's a little bit more elaborate than this, but the basic components of it say, first of all, we all start off in what we call the ordinary world. Basically, what that means, Jim, is we have our day-to-day lives. We're living our life, everything's going along as it always goes along. We might have some minor trials and tribulations. You know, my car didn't start this morning because it's too cold, etc. So we have that sort of stuff that's still part of my ordinary world, you know, day in, day out living. And that's the sort of living that all of us are familiar with. Well, as I said before, you know, that's just kind of a narrative, if you will. But what makes a good story isn't just a narrative day-to-day living, because there's no real conflict there. The conflict is minor at best. My car didn't start. It took me 2 minutes to warm up. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Who cares? We fall asleep after that. I mean, that's the reality. So in the good story structure, what we have is what we call an inciting incident. And what that means is a big problem presents itself, something which you haven't seen before. It's totally like shakes you out of your world. Like, oh my gosh, I can no longer go on in my ordinary world because this incident appeared with what we call a call to action. I have to do something. I have to take action, because if I don't take action, oh my gosh, my world will never be the same. I have no choice. You going down the road, and instead of your car not starting, there's a major thing where you come up to your building where you work, and they moved, and they didn't tell you. Okay? Uh-oh. The old fear of the kid goes off to college and comes home and the parents have moved? Yeah, well, now that just happened to you. Your boss moved and didn't tell you where he went. Uh-oh, this is a problem, because I was coming here today. What am I going to do? Where's my paycheck coming from? Now we have a big problem on our hands. And so again, if you think to all the books that we've read and the movies we've seen, they always start off with a person in his or her every day-to-day life. Something big happens and calls them to action. And the classic structure here, for those of you who have seen like Star Wars, the Star Wars trilogy, this is, the classic typification of this type of model. You have good old Luke Skywalker there on his planet and just living his life, and suddenly, boom, boom, this whole starship comes. You have all this sort of stuff happening here. So that's the basic thing here, is you're in your ordinary world, there's a big problem, call to action. And along the way, we have all these different conflicts and struggles and different things that happen to us, because, again, if it's all easygoing, it's boring. And humans are not wired for, placidity at the end of the day. We like it. Yes, we do. We like tranquility, but the reality we thrive is to hear that conflict, that, okay, I'm alive. And so conflict and struggles, conflict and struggles, conflict and struggles, some small, some big, some small, some big, usually ending in the biggest conflict of all, where it's almost life or death, and you go past that final struggle. And once you go past that final struggle, you are now transformed. You are no longer the person you were before. You're now somebody wholly different because of everything you went through in this, what we call the sacred world. It's going from the ordinary world to the sacred world. You've actually gone through all these behaviors and all these actions. Your whole world has changed, and you will never be the same person again, because you've been transformed into somebody different, better, newer version of you, whatever. And then we have what we call the return with the elixir, which basically says, now you know the answer. Now you actually have the solution to these problems, and you can share that with others. And that's the hero's journey structure in a nutshell in terms of what we've seen in classic movies and books. So does that structure make sense?
No, absolutely. And I think the one thing to clarify that you and I spoke about, the word hero doesn't necessarily mean they're a hero. It just means like the protagonist, the main character in the story.
Absolutely right.
This is what's happening.
Absolutely right. Hero does not mean hero in the sense of I am taking out my sword and shield. Hero is the main character. So when we say hero's journey, for those of you familiar with literary type stuff, it's the protagonist, the person who is the central character in the story. The hero could be a downright villain when it comes down to it. And we've seen books and movies like that where the central character is a villain, is not a good person. And even like if anybody's seen like recently The Wolf of Wall Street, that person is not a hero in the sense that we'd like to think of a hero. But Leo DiCaprio's character was absolutely the hero of the story in terms of being the central character, the protagonist that we can identify with, that rebel, that outlaw, watching out for himself. That's a hero's journey story.
Well, and I what's kind of jumping into my mind, if I'm sitting back here as a promotional consultant, I'm saying, okay, well, I've seen stories before, I've seen them all my life, but how does that translate to a company? I mean, is this the same journey? I mean, so this is the kind of story we want to help our clients tell and convey, so that they're remembered. Like, so do we help them develop their stories about their sales?
We help them develop their stories about their products, and we develop the stories for our own selves and our own products. So, for example, if I were a promotional product consultant looking to translate this structure to my personal sales, I would do two things. the first thing I would do is I would understand everything I could about the client I'm talking to. That's just good salesmanship. Find out what they desire, why were they in business, what are they looking to get out of all this, blah, 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 all the stuff that a good salesperson should do. So it's not just, hey, here's my product, here's the price, all right? But really, why are you here? Why do you exist? These are the type of, deep questions. If I can get to that. By doing that, I then transform myself and my company in terms of the hero's journey. I say, that's a really interesting thing. And what you want to do is show them how their product and your product coincide. So what you're going to do here is show them how you understand where they're coming from. You may be like them, as we talked about before. You and I have similar yearnings. Or it could be, I don't really have the same yearnings in my business, but I do have these yearnings which support your yearnings. So, for example, surprise, surprise, most of the stuff I approach with is what we would call a sage character, somebody who likes to use knowledge and learn things. Quite a shock, right? So, but I like to use knowledge to help those of you who want to do something different, who want to maybe take care of others, who maybe want to create a strong, stable community, et cetera, et cetera. And I use knowledge as my tool to help you get your desire. So by doing that with this hero's journey structure, what I would do is start off with, where you're at, which is your ordinary world. And then I would go into the inciting incident, which is basically, well, yeah, but here's all the problems with the ordinary world, if you will. And you start to find what I call, this is my more advanced stuff that we unfortunately don't have time for today. I'll give you guys this feedback in your homework critiques. But basically, I find the subsuming solution. I find what is it that everybody wants. What's the real big problem at all of this at the end of the day? Not the little problems, but what's the real big problem? And I position myself as, well, here's the real answer to this. That's the elixir, if you will. So I'm kind of going through this model here by a good salesman's journey, if you will, of getting in step with where you are, understanding your world, and then really understanding your problems and not making them up, not trying to plant a needless fear in your mind, but really telling you the reality of the world as it exists and how it impacts you and how it impacts all of us and what you need to know about that. But it's not just leave you in a state of turmoil, but to then say, hey, you know what, I struggle through the same sorts of things myself. Or if I haven't struggled through them, then I've worked with a client who struggled through a similar thing. And they were able to do X, Y, and Z. And I know you have a great case study of this coming up, Jim. They were able to do X, Y, and Z, and here's how they used it. And here's the elixir, if you will. So you basically are going through these steps of here's where you are, here's the problems, here's your call to action, here's the conflicts you've encountered, here's the elixir, and here's how you can transform yourselves with it.
Yep. So what I'm gathering is we have there's an upper story and lower story here.
Mm-hmm.
Say that the upper story here is about us, is about
right.
us as salespeople, and applying this story concept, to our own lives and our own sales success. And then there's applying that with our customers and really getting genuinely that making that our genuine character, and then we can uncover these big problems that our clients have, and then
exactly.
we position ourselves and our solution around that. And it's, again, helping that client tell their story better so they're
mm-hmm.
communicating and solving their problems.
Exactly right, Jim, exactly right. And as I say, it goes back to what we talked about before with integrity, in that I don't want to just, any person, and this is a sad but true statement, and so I can say it because unfortunately it is true. Anybody who is well-versed in sales and marketing techniques and principles can use these techniques and principles to sell things to people that the people don't need. We can do that, okay? But that goes back to that character of integrity. What you're saying is absolutely dead on right. If I understand myself, my own integrity, my vision for you, I understand where you are, your world that you're in, and therefore, just like a kid who's learning to drive, they don't see all the problems that we see. Imagine if you have a 16-year-old just getting his or her license and they're going down these winter roads that you and I are facing here in Pennsylvania. We're going to see problems that we've experienced that they never will think of because they just don't even know to think of it. And that's the whole notion of, I'm not trying to scare you as much as I really love you and care about you, and therefore I want you to be aware of this so that you have the best possible outcome you can possibly have. And that's that big story, little story you're talking about with the inciting incidents and the call to actions and the conflicts and all that good stuff.
And I think if each of us thought for a little bit, we know the kind of organizations or the kind of products that I want to say that people have gotten sucked into, mm-hmm. because such a good story was told about certain needs, certain fears, and
right.
whether they might not have been completely there might have been some accuracy, but maybe they were exaggerated to a point, and that was, sort of, it can be used not always in the best way, and that's part
exactly
of
right.
Part of the power of it too, but
right.
we need to be careful.
Right, exactly right. I mean, these tools are amoral. They don't have morals in and of themselves. They can be used for good or for bad, just like money is amoral. It can be used for good or for bad. That's just a reality of our lives. I prefer to use them for good, as do you. But I'm not lying and saying you can't, because of course you can. But I hope people on this call don't. I hope that they use them for good.
Yep. So let's transition over to some of the elements of a brand story that we should make sure we have.
Absolutely right. Well, as your elements for the brand story, Jim, what you want to do, what everybody on this call, what you want to do, is you have to realize there are basically 4 key components to a good brand story. They're the plot, the characters, the message, and the aesthetics. The plot we've talked about before. It could be that notion of the romantic comedy. It could be the Western. It could be the action. Basically, is that whole type of plot structure that we're familiar with. So if I'm doing a Western, the lone stranger rides into town. He cleans up the trouble. He kisses the girl, gets on his horse, and rides out. We're all familiar with these basic structures. What you want to do when you're telling your story is pick a plot that resonates, that you can actually tell your story with. That's one aspect. More important than even that is the notion of characters that we talked about before as well. What is your character in this story? Who are you as a person in the company? Who is your client as a person in a company? Who are their customers as a person or a company? And you have to understand all the different roles and characters, how they support each other, and what their yearnings are so they can reinforce each other. So we have our structure, if you will, the plot. That's in any story. Any story also has the characters involved. And for our purposes as well, we want to have a message. And the message is essentially the theme to the story. Why am I telling you this story? Remember I talked about 3 Little Pigs before? And I said the real message to that story is be industrious, be a hard worker, get up early, and you'll beat out the the people who are trying to harm you and take away from you, because that's what it comes down to. I want you to be a good industrious worker. And that's actually the real message to that story. So what is the key takeaway I want you to get out of this? When I tell you my story, what's the key thing I want you to remember, the key point, the key idea? And then we have what we call aesthetics, which is how I dress the story up, how I change the accessories. Because if you think about it, and everybody here I think is aware of this, we all know this, if what I said is the case, there's only about half a dozen or so different plots, and there's only about 12 different characters that we can use. Well, if you do the math, that gives us at most like 100 to a couple hundred different options of stories, and congratulations, those stories have all been told. Well, no, it's not the case, because what happens is all I have to do is tell you the same story, but I change the accessories, I change the surroundings, I change the environment, I change the accoutrements, if you will. So back to like Star Wars, it was taught when Star Wars first came out back in the 70s, basically everyone said basically all it is a big Western set in outer space. But when you think about it, Star Wars has all the required components of a good Western, down to the bar scene with the strangers in town, things like that. And so if you think and actually go back and watch Star Wars again, you're going to see it's nothing more than a good old Clint Eastwood type Western. It's just a Western. But they changed it around into space, and they changed the characters, et cetera, et cetera. And because I can now change my aesthetics, I can tell you thousands and thousands and thousands of stories and never duplicate myself.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I love it, as you can tell.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, I guess my main question is that, when you're developing this brand story, or, you're thinking about telling the story, would you recommend, it seems like we got to get to what's the key takeaway? What's that key takeaway point? And once we know that, then, we change the aesthetics, we change the characters, we change
exactly
the plot.
right.
As long as we're telling that same core message,
exactly right.
That's what's important.
Exactly right. The message is key to this entire process, and also the other thing with story, as we're telling it, as you and I know, has to go with that character integrity. Well, the character also stands for the congruence aspect. I don't want to change my message. My message will always be the same message. You need this because it goes back to my homework for everybody of my vision for you. You need to know this because it will make you more successful, happier, and et cetera, because of this. Boom. And so my message for you should be carved in stone for the most part, because I want to reinforce that message at every single branding opportunity that I have.
Cool. Well, let's go, I guess, translating the story to sales success.
Sure, absolutely. To translate this to sales success, basically, it's what we've alluded to before, in all honesty. The first thing you have to do is really understand your audience, who you assign to, what motivates them, all that good stuff. But more importantly is you really want to get to what I call their yearnings. And this goes back to the character development. If you really understand what character is and that we all living out our own stories of day-to-day lives, what we realize is that there are so many characters, but they all share common yearnings. If I'm the lover, again, my yearning is to have a deep connection with somebody else. If I have, for me, example, a sage-type character, then I have a deep desire to really understand my world and learn everything I can about it and share that knowledge. And that's what really motivates me more than anything. Talking with you, Jim, I know we've discussed this, and I would say you probably have classic, what we call caregiver, a caregiver-type character, if you will, where you really want to help other people, help nurture them, help them, protect them where necessary, and really guide them appropriately that way. And so by understanding what's motivating the person, you understand what they really want more than anything. And the secret to this is when you're selling yourself to people or you're selling your product to people, and this is for everybody on the call, what you really want to do is say, well, here's the yearning, but back to what makes a good story. What is the most important thing that makes a story compelling to people? Conflict. All right? And so the biggest conflict you have is I have a deep, deep yearning that is not being fulfilled. Okay? And if you have that, and I can see, well, this is your deep yearning, but it's not being fulfilled in this way, and I can now show you how whatever I'm offering you helps you fulfill that yearning, then you and I are going to be doing business for a long time to come.
Yep.
And that's the getting a step piece to this.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as it's what I'm seeing here, which is also valuable in all marketing, is this repetition. We're saying, essentially the same core message, and we're saying it again, and part of that I see is this, in order to get to this, you got to spend time with people.
Absolutely.
And you've got to listen to them. You got to have
Absolutely.
that genuine desire to do that.
Right. It comes back, Jim, you and I have talked about this many times, it comes back to relationship. And I know you're an avid relationship marketer, as I am. And for this to be truly powerful, you have to want to say, I don't just want your business. Yes, I do want your business. I won't lie. You want to pay me? I'll happily take it. You want to hire me? Fine. I'd love to work with you. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I care about people. I care about your successes. And therefore, boom, let's do this. Okay? And if I can't really help you, I really don't want your money. And I've turned clients away because I really can't help them with what they wanted to do. And it's like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Go here instead.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I think that's a good overriding, thought and principle. And I think that resonates very well. I think with the people that are in attendance. So, then thanks for continuing to spread that message. But I'm really excited to talk about my applied example.
Absolutely, I'm excited to hear this one too. I love this example. Please share.
So again, it'll be a little bit repetitive, but we're going to do this in story format. So, I've had the pleasure to work with Kay Abner from AMPM Promotions, who does product branding for a nonprofit organization called Chemo Duck. This organization does an amazing job telling their story. They do it, online. Obviously, they use our product, and you will really, want to spend some time, checking out their website to see how they do it, because I believe, out of all the clients that we work with, they've really, really mastered branding with character. So let's talk a little bit about the story. So the first thing, let's start like unwinding the story, because there's a lot here. And I think, once you see and hear this story and understand all its characters, you'll have a clear picture of this hero's journey, translated to business and a lot of things that Gary, you were talking about. And we're going to see how powerful it is. So what I want to do is quickly transition to a video that they have out on their website. So hold on, we gotta share desktop. There we go. Hopefully, Gary, let me know when you have that up on your screen.
I see it.
You see it? All right. And now I need to. Do you see the whole thing, or you just see a?
I'm seeing you scrolling around. So yes.
interesting. The play button has mysteriously disappeared.
There we are.
I think one. Hold on, I get it. You guys can't hear it, right? Can you? I'm going to turn up the volume for you.
The reason I was so tired is because I was up all night worrying. I'm not eating because I'm afraid that food will make me sick. I don't want to tell you that my back hurts because I don't want another shot. Every time we drive to the hospital, my tummy hurts. I'm not afraid of cancer. I'm afraid of the doctors.
As a parent, when your child's diagnosed with cancer, it's very difficult to know what's going through your child's mind. Children are not very likely to communicate those things with you, and it makes you feel very helpless.
When children are newly diagnosed with cancer, it's the most devastating thing they and their families will ever go through. I always tell families that the old normal has gone away, and now there's the new normal. So they don't go to school like they used to, or they get chemotherapy or come to clinic, maybe have surgery, maybe have radiation. But anything that we can do to help these families get through it, and at the end, be healed from their cancer and live long, happy, healthy lives, that's worth it.
Having chemo-dose child through treatment with really helped Gabe to not be so afraid, and also it gave me a window into what he was thinking and feeling emotionally and physically.
So the chemo duck is a visual tool that we can use to teach the patient about how we treat their cancer. For instance, we need to give them chemotherapy to their central line. We can show them by doing it to the chemo duck first, and that might lessen their fear.
As a parent, I went from feeling completely helpless to feeling like I had a role in Gabe's medical team, and I was able to help Gabe feel a little bit better.
When you're a child with cancer, it's not easy to understand your feelings, much less share them with others. Gabe's My Heart is an organization that pairs chemo ducks with kids who have cancer. By helping them express their emotions and better understand their treatment, these ducks comfort children in ways no adult could. What's more, they also give parents and caregivers a window into their children's feelings. As they care and speak for their chemo ducks, kids communicate things they otherwise might not say. But this isn't just about ducks. Every time you donate a chemo duck, you're also contributing to an entire program that educates and supports families coping with childhood cancer. Simply put, your gift can keep these families comforted, making that one feeling that's easy to share.
Hey, here, I'm with my friend Grace. We just wanted to tell you that $30 can provide humble hope for a kid with childhood cancer. Isn't that right, Grace? I love you.
All right, I'm going to switch back here. Gary, did the sound come through okay?
Yeah. I mean, it was. We could hear. It was very. It's a very powerful story, applied story example. So I'm going to let you step us through that because it's really interesting what was done there.
Yeah. So there really is more to this story. Well, that I believe the video leaves out, and that's what I want to kind of just rehash it here. So the beginning of the story really is on Christmas Day 2002. Nearly a 1-year-old baby boy named Gabe was diagnosed with cancer. In the midst of like confusion, anger, and intense hurt that his parents were going through at the time, a big stuffed duck was delivered to comfort Gabe. Mm-hmm. And as you might imagine, like a duck to water, Gabe fell in love with the duck and named him Connor. His mother at the time, who felt completely helpless in her son's treatment, decided that she was going to, fulfill some of her inner yearnings, right? Mm-hmm. She dressed the duck up in a doctor's clothing, equipped him with things like bandages, bandanas, and ports, so Gabe could begin to understand what was going to happen to him. Gabe took this duck to all his doctor's visits, asked if treatments could be given to the duck first. Gabe's fears were reduced, and his new best friend, Connor, never left his side. As the relationship matured, Gabe was able to share with his parents and friends how Connor was feeling for the treatments, and after 2 years of chemotherapy, Gabe was cancer-free.
Wow.
So, and he still is cancer-free to this day. And, you know, on that winter day in 2002, let's face it, his family received more than a stuffed up toy. They received huggable hope. And I know that there's a lot of research out there about, you know, not just the medicine, but that mental framework of being positive and how that is so helpful for healing.
Right.
And it's because someone gave a duck and the yearnings of his mother, you know, Gabe's mother, that wanted to help her son. I mean, see, that was a yearning, right? I think that's a yearning, a caregiver yearning, a yearning
Absolutely.
that a lot of us parents have. And something special about Lou, who's his mother, is that she wanted to change the world, like a lot of us people do. And that's why Chemo Duck was created, and I believe is so successful. Take someone that's in an ordinary world, like you had pointed out, goes through a very unfortunate set of circumstances.
Right, right.
And now, in a sense, 3 characters emerge. We got Gabe's mother, Lou, Gabe, Connor the Chemo Duck. And to this day, they continue on this mission to provide comfort, companionship through play therapy to help children and their families facing these type of challenges with cancer. So, you know, to me, there was not a better, I mean, especially when we talk the word hero, you know, there is not a better example. And I think if you are a person that is a caregiver and that is someone that values, wants to change the world, leave the world a better place, you know, this is a story that I think going to resonate very, very deeply, you know, with that audience. So, can everybody, are we back on the screen here?
We're back to the slides. Yeah.
Back to the slides. Okay. So, I want to transition over to, you know, our huggable hope, and really, like, what is this? What's the marketing message? And for me, it hits me right in the face because I've done a little more research into the story. Is that quality stories and special people make brands before any amount of education and marketing or printed products that they use. It's these stories and the characters that give us the opportunity to do amazing branding work for them. I think it's about finding what that story is and then helping those people really brand it, really market their story. And I had the pleasure just the other day to trade emails with Lou, that's Gabe's mother. And I had one question to ask her. I said, because, you know, on their website you can learn so much about her. I mean, it's practically an open book, you know, what they've done. And I said, just curious, what was your background and work experience before founding the Chemo Duck organization? She said, and this is from the email, she said, I moved from the UK to the United States in 1992 after completing a degree in three-dimensional design. I worked for a stained glass studio for a short while. She worked for a stained glass studio for a short while before returning to her childhood love of gymnastics. Until Gabe was diagnosed, she was employed as a gymnastics coach. She said that she enjoyed coaching the upper level gymnastics, but her passion was working with special needs and preschool children. Recently, she worked part-time as a teacher's assistant in special needs classrooms. And currently, I am lucky enough to be running Chemo Duck full-time. That's her story, and what's such a powerful message. And I think as we look at organizations and their character, and we talked about that integrity and that consistency, I think it's clear to see that this organization is everything its characters are about, which is helping children and families win the fight for childhood cancer. So let me just share with you very quickly, like, the results. So, yeah, this is all well and good, but how is this translated to a success? Well, Chemo Duck has sold over there's been over 25,000 Chemo Ducks that have been delivered to pediatric cancer patients in nearly every state in the United States and also some hospitals in England. I mean, if you go on their website, you're going to see hundreds of hospitals that participate in this program. Chemo Duck has its own coloring book, its own cartoon, its song. This little boy Gabe has walked the red carpet and has been featured in movies. I mean, this is a real story about a real journey and a real hero that I think a lot of us can get connected to. I know we're running short on time, but when you do look closer at this Chemo Duck and their brand and their social media and everything, I think what you're going to find is that it's because of the passion that they have, they've been able to transform literally a death sentence into an attractive brand about being a hero. And I think when you can do that, I mean, that is, I get the chills just talking about it. You can go on this website, you see this brand with all the celebrity endorsements that they have. You see the picture there, that's the guy from Duck Dynasty. It's just simply amazing.
Very powerful.
And again, I want to reiterate that these people, that Lou is not a full-time marketing professional. She just was extremely clear, committed, and passionate about her mission. And that is, and she can't, this organization cannot wait to tell you this story and get you involved, in their mission. So that is the best example that I can give. In the past, we've done some special offers as part of our webinar, and a lot of it's been valuable, additional branding information. I really want to encourage our listeners, our attendees, to check out chemoduck.org, and if you are so inspired to help this organization to win this battle and help and be a hero for other people and other families that are going through this, if you decide to donate, you will receive, it's $30 for a duck. You will receive a $60 off for coupon on your next order with Artistic Toy. So that's just, my part of, saying thank you to you all. And if you're so inspired, that would be fantastic, because not only are you going to help somebody else, you are going to see a fantastic, an absolute amazing, example of how characters and branding is done through looking at this organization's website. So I guess that's my homework, or my homework for our attendees. So that really concludes our webinar. I know we're once again we're at the end of our 60 minutes. We're at 61 minutes, I suppose. So are there any do we have any questions, William, that have come up?
No, not yet. No, sir.
Okay. Well, again, I really do appreciate everyone's participation. Gary, I think we kept it very, interactive and learning throughout the process. There will be, William, there's going to be replays made available. If there's any additional questions, you have homework, that we weren't able, I'd say the questions maybe we weren't able to answer today, please send us, directly send emails to us. And,
yes, send me your homework. I'm interested to see it. I'll help you give you a non-grade.
All right. Well, William, did we leave anything out on your end from PPAI's perspective?
That was it, sir. No, that's a good job.
All right. Well, thank you, William, and thank you, PPAI. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, William. Thanks, Jim, and thanks everybody for listening. This is great.
I want to offer special thanks to our speakers, Jim and Gary, for sharing their expertise today. Today's webinar is copyrighted and all rights reserved by Promotional Products Association International. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. To enable PPAI to continuously improve our product offerings to you, please take 2 minutes to complete the following survey that will direct you to your screen. Have a great day.